When two orphans aged out of the system, the only thing they inherited was a worthless plot of land. But what they found in the barn would force them to question everything they thought they knew about their family, their past, and the price of true freedom. If you've ever felt like the world had forgotten you, stick around. This story is for you. And if it hits home, maybe subscribe, because we're building a community here for people who've had to fight for every inch of their lives. The bus wheezed to a stop, its brakes sighing like a man giving up on a long argument. For a full minute, that was the only sound. The sigh of the bus, the low rumble of its engine, and the frantic, papery beat of my own heart against my ribs. I turned to my sister, Chloe. She was staring out the window, her breath fogging a small circle on the cold glass. She was 17, a year younger than me, but in that moment, she looked about 10. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, absorbing the gray, unwelcoming landscape of a town we'd never seen before. This was it, the end of the line. For 2 years, we'd been in the system, shuttled from one sterile group home to another after our parents died. 2 years of counting down the days until my 18th birthday, the magical date when we'd be free. Now freedom felt less like a sunrise and more like being pushed out of a boat in the middle of a cold, gray lake. Lau. Chloe's voice was small, a thread of sound in the quiet bus. Are you sure about this? I looked from her face to the single envelope on my lap. It was a cheap business envelope, my name and hers typed on the front with the address of our last group home. Inside was a bus ticket, a cashier's check for $200, and a letter from a lawyer we'd never met. The letter was clipped formal. It informed us that upon my reaching the age of legal majority, the estate of our late grandfather, Thomas Miller, was to be transferred to us. The estate consisted of a single parcel of land, 500 acres. It sounded like a kingdom. The reality, the lawyer had explained over a crackling phone line, was less majestic. The land was remote, undeveloped, and carried a staggering burden of back taxes. He'd used words like encumbered and insolvent. He'd advised us to sign a quitclaim deed, let the county seize the property, and walk away. But we couldn't. It was the only thing we had. The only thread connecting us to a past we barely remembered. Our grandfather had been a ghost in our lives, a man our mother rarely spoke of. We had a single, faded photograph of him holding me as a baby, his face weathered and kind, his eyes squinting against the sun we couldn't see. He died a few years before our parents, and we'd never even been to his funeral. I'm sure, I said, trying to make my voice sound more confident than I felt. It's ours, Chloe. It's a start. The bus driver cleared his throat, a loud, gravelly sound that made us both jump. In the line, kids. This is Red Creek. We gathered our 2 duffel bags, the sum total of our worldly possessions. As we stepped off the bus, the cold hit me like a physical blow. It was late autumn in the mountains, and the air was thin and sharp, smelling of wood smoke and damp earth. Red Creek wasn't so much a town as a suggestion of one. A gas station with a convenience store attached, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and a handful of houses scattered along a two-lane road that disappeared into the pines. The lawyer's office was supposed to be above the hardware store. Mr. Davies was exactly what I'd pictured. A man in his late 50s with a tired face, a suit that was a little too big for him, and an office that smelled of stale coffee and old paper. He didn't stand up when we came in. He just gestured to the 2 worn client chairs in front of his massive, cluttered desk. Leo and Chloe Miller, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm Arthur Davies. I was your grandfather's attorney. He slid a thick file across the desk. This is the estate. As I told you on the phone, it's not much of an inheritance. In fact, it's a liability. He pulled out a document covered in red stamps. Tax delinquency notice. Your grandfather hadn't paid property taxes in almost a decade. The county has a lien on the property. The total amount due, with penalties and interest, is $47,312. I felt the air leave my lungs. $47,000. We had $184 left from the cashier's check after buying snacks on the bus. Chloe's hand found mine under the desk and squeezed, her fingers cold. There's more, Mr. Davies said, his tone flat, as if he were delivering a weather report. A development corporation, Mountain Valley Holdings, has been trying to acquire the land for years. They want it for a ski resort. Your grandfather always refused to sell. They've made a final offer, contingent on the clearing of the tax lien. They'll pay the $47,000 directly to the county, and they'll give you $5,000 for the deed. He pushed another paper towards us. A contract. $5,000. It felt like a fortune and an insult at the same time. So we either take their offer, I said, my voice hoarse, or we lose it all anyway and get nothing. That's the practical reality of it, son, Davies said, not unkindly. It's a tough break. Thomas was a stubborn man. He held on to that land like it was gold, but he let everything else slide. The house is probably uninhabitable. The barn is likely collapsed. It's 500 acres of rock and pine trees on the side of a mountain nobody wants to climb. He leaned back, the old leather of his chair groaning in protest. Look, kids, I'm sorry for your troubles. I am. My advice is to take the deal. $5,000 is a fresh start. You can get an apartment in a real city, find jobs. Put this all behind you. I looked at Chloe. Her eyes were shimmering with unshed tears, her jaw tight. She was thinking the same thing I was. It was our name on that deed. Miller, the last piece of our family we had left. Signing it away felt like signing away our own history, what little of it there was. We want to see it first, Chloe said, her voice surprisingly firm. Mr. Davies blinked, surprised. See it? There's nothing to see. It's 4 miles up a dirt road that's probably washed out. There's no power, no running water. We want to see it, I echoed, finding my own voice. Before we sign anything, he sighed again, a long, drawn-out sound of resignation. He rubbed his tired eyes. All right, it's your right. The property starts about 3 miles north of town. Look for a rusted gate with a faded M on it. The road is on the left. I can't guarantee you'll be able to get a car up there. You might have to walk. He scribbled a crude map on the back of a notepad. Here, Jed at the diner might give you a ride to the turnoff if you buy a meal. He knew your grandfather. He stood then, a sign the meeting was over. Call me when you've made a decision. The offer from Mountain Valley expires in 72 hours. We walked out his office and into the biting wind, the papers clutched in my hand. The weight of it all felt immense, a physical pressure on my chest. $47,000 in debt, a $5,000 escape hatch, and 500 acres of forgotten land waiting for us at the end of a washed-out road. Jed at the diner was a big man with a kind face and a greasy apron. When we told him who we were, his eyes softened. Tommy Miller's grandkids? Lord have mercy. I heard you kids were away, he didn't press. He just poured us 2 big cups of coffee and served us plates of hash browns and eggs that tasted like the best food I'd ever had. He told us a little about our grandfather, that he was quiet, kept to himself, that he'd been a logger in his youth, but had mostly just worked the land, fixing fences, hunting. He loved that mountain, Jed said, wiping the counter with a damp rag. Said it was the only honest thing in the world. Wouldn't sell a single acre of it. Not for anything. He agreed to give us a ride. His old pickup truck rattled and groaned, the heater blasting lukewarm, dusty air into the cab. We drove out of the small cluster of buildings and into the deep woods. The paved road turned to gravel, then to dirt. The trees crowded in, tall and silent, their branches bare against the white sky. This is it, Jed said, pulling over next to a pair of sagging, rusted gates. A metalum, almost completely obscured by rust and vines, hung crookedly from one of them. Beyond the gate, a dirt track, more of a trail than a road, snaked up into the woods and disappeared. It was covered in fallen leaves and looked like it hadn't been driven on in years. You sure about this, kids? Jed asked, his brow furrowed with concern. It's going to be dark in a few hours. And cold, we're sure, I said. We just have to see it. He nodded slowly, accepting it. All right, you get into trouble, you walk back to the main road. Someone will come by eventually. Or come back to the diner. I'll help you out. We thanked him, grabbed our duffel bags, and watched as his truck kicked up a cloud of dust and disappeared back toward town. And then we were alone. The silence was absolute. Not the muffled quiet of the group home, with its humming fluorescent lights and the distant sound of a television, but a deep, profound silence that felt ancient. It was the silence of the mountain. We pushed open the gate. It shrieked in protest, the sound unnaturally loud. We stepped through, and it felt like crossing a threshold into another world. The air was colder here, under the canopy of the trees. We started walking. The road was steep and uneven, littered with rocks and gullies carved by years of rain. Mr. Davies was right. No car could have made this journey. We walked for what felt like hours, our breath pluming in the air, the straps of our duffel bags digging into our shoulders. Every so often, I'd stop and listen, but there was nothing. No birds, no cars, just the rustle of our own feet in the leaves and the whisper of the wind in the pines. Chloe was quiet, her energy focused on the climb. I kept glancing at her, worried. This was my idea, my stubborn refusal to just sign the papers and walk away. If this turned out to be a disaster, a final, cruel joke played on us by fate, it would be my fault. After nearly an hour of climbing, the trees began to thin. We came around a sharp bend, and the land leveled out into a clearing. And there it was. The house was a skeleton. Its roof sagged in the middle like a broken back, windows were shattered, and the porch had collapsed on one side, leaving it tilted at a drunken angle. It was small, made of weathered, gray wood that looked like it had grown right out of the soil. To its left stood the barn. It was huge, far larger than the house. Its red paint faded to a pale, mottled pink. Unlike the house, it seemed solid, its roofline straight, and its massive doors shut tight. It stood like a silent, patient guardian. We dropped our bags on the overgrown patch of what might have been a lawn. We were both breathing hard, a combination of the climb and the sight in front of us. This was it, our inheritance, a ruin and a barn. It's something, Chloe said, her voice a little shaky. It's ours, I said, though the words tasted like ash. I didn't know what I had expected. A cabin, maybe, a place we could fix up. This felt hopeless. This felt like proof that Mr. Davies was right. We had walked all this way just to confirm that we had nothing. We approached the house first, stepping carefully over the rotted boards of the porch. The front door hung open on one hinge. Inside, it was a mess. Raccoons or other animals had torn through everything. Stuffing was pulled from an old armchair, and leaves and dirt covered the floor. But there were traces of a life lived here. A shelf of dusty books, their covers warped by damp. A stack of old National Geographic magazines. In the kitchen, a single tin coffee cup sat on the counter, as if waiting for its owner to return. It was profoundly sad. We didn't stay long. The feeling of decay was too strong. We went back outside into the cold, clean air. My eyes were drawn to the barn. It was the only thing on the property that didn't look like it was about to be reclaimed by the forest. What do you think is in there? Chloe asked, hugging herself against the cold. Old tools? A tractor? Probably just more junk, I said, but I found myself walking towards it anyway. The main doors were massive, made of thick, heavy planks of wood, held shut by a thick wooden beam dropped into iron brackets. It took both of us, grunting with effort, to lift the beam and slide it free. With a deep groan of protest, one of the doors swung inward into darkness. The smell hit us first. Not the smell of rot and decay like in the house, but the rich, earthy scent of old hay, dust, and cold earth. It smelled clean. We stepped inside, and the light from the open door cut a bright rectangle into the vast, cathedral-like space. Dust motes danced in the beam of light. The barn was immense. To our left were a series of empty animal stalls. To our right, old farm equipment stood like sleeping iron beasts under thick blankets of dust, a plow, a seeder, a hay rake. High above, a hayloft ran the length of the barn, its floor shadowed and mysterious. It was empty, mostly stripped clean. It felt less abandoned and more intentionally cleared out. He must have sold everything off, I murmured, my voice echoing slightly in the huge space. We started to explore, our footsteps stirring up little puffs of dust. There was nothing of value, just the detritus of a long-finished life. Rusted coffee cans full of nuts and bolts, piles of old burlap sacks, a stack of dried-out lumber. It was disappointing. I felt a fresh wave of hopelessness wash over me. We should have just taken the money. This was a fool's errand, a childish need to see a place that meant nothing, that was worth nothing. I was about to suggest we head back down the mountain when Chloe called out, "Leo, look at this." She was standing at the far end of the barn in the deepest shadows. I walked over to her. She was pointing at the floor. In the packed earth floor, near the back wall, was a set of iron rings, almost completely buried. They were handles for a trapdoor. My heart started beating faster. A trapdoor. It was like something out of a storybook. We knelt down and started digging at the hard-packed dirt with our fingers. It was slow, cold work. After a few minutes, we had cleared the edges of a large, square wooden door set flush with the floor. The iron rings were heavy and cold. Together, we pulled. At first, it wouldn't budge. It seemed fused to the ground. I put my feet against the wall for leverage and pulled with all my strength. Chloe pulled alongside me. With a loud crack of splintering wood and a shower of dirt, the door lifted a few inches. A wave of musty, subterranean air washed over us, colder than the air in the barn. We propped it open and peered into the darkness. A set of steep wooden steps led down into a small cellar. It wasn't a root cellar. It was too small and too well hidden for that. It was a hiding place. "Do you have a flashlight?" I asked. Chloe fumbled in her bag and produced a small keychain light. Its beam was weak, but it was enough. I took a deep breath and started down the steps, the wood creaking ominously under my weight. Chloe followed close behind. The cellar was tiny, no bigger than a closet, with stone walls and a dirt floor. And in the center of the floor sat a single object, a dark green, metal footlocker, the kind soldiers use. It was locked with a heavy padlock. "No way," Chloe whispered, her voice filled with awe. My mind was racing. Why would our grandfather, a simple farmer, have a hidden cellar with a locked footlocker? What could possibly be inside? "We have to open it," I said. We looked around the barn for something to break the lock. I found a heavy crowbar leaning against one of the stalls. It felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Back down in the cellar, I wedged the end of the crowbar into the shackle of the padlock and put all my weight on it. The metal groaned. I pushed harder, my muscles straining. With a sharp, deafening crack, the lock snapped. The sound echoed in the small space. For a moment, we just stared at the broken lock, our breathing loud and ragged. My hands were shaking. I lifted the lid of the footlocker. It opened with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like old, yellowed wool blankets, were two things. The first was a stack of rectangular, paper-wrapped bundles. I picked one up. It was heavy, dense. I tore a corner of the brown paper wrapping. My breath caught in my throat. It was cash. Stacks of $100 bills, held together with rubber bands. I pulled out another bundle, and another. They were all the same. There were at least a dozen of them. It was an impossible amount of money. "Leo," Chloe breathed. "How much?" "I don't know," I whispered, my mind reeling. It had to be more than enough to pay the taxes. Far more. But beneath the bundles of cash was something else. A large, sealed manila envelope with our names written on it in a shaky but elegant cursive script. "Leo and Chloe." I lifted the envelope out. It was thick, heavy with paper. My fingers trembled as I broke the brittle wax seal. Inside was a stack of letters, 20 or 30 of them, written on thin, almost translucent paper. At the top of the first page was a date from 15 years ago. The letter began, "My dearest grandchildren." I sat down on the cold dirt floor of the hidden cellar, the money forgotten, and began to read my grandfather's words aloud, my voice shaking in the enclosed space. "My dearest grandchildren, if you are reading this, then it means I am gone, and it means you have come back. It means you were stubborn enough, or hopeful enough, to ignore the advice you were surely given to walk away from this place. That stubbornness, that hope, that is from me. I am proud of you for it already." I had to stop and take a breath. Chloe sat down next to me, her arm pressed against mine, a silent pillar of support. I continued, "I know you have questions. I know you probably hate me. I know you believe I abandoned you, and your mother before you. The story you were told is that I was a drunk, a failure who drove his only daughter away and wanted nothing to do with his grandchildren. That is the story I needed everyone to believe. It was a lie, a necessary, painful lie to keep you safe, the letter went on to explain. He hadn't been a logger his whole life. For a time, desperate for money after my grandmother died, he had gotten involved with some very dangerous men. He worked as a transporter for a criminal enterprise, moving illicit goods through the mountains he knew so well. He thought it was a one-time job, a way to get ahead. But once you were in, you were never truly out. He made good money, but it came at a terrible cost. He was owned by them. When my mother announced she was pregnant with me, he knew he had to get out. He couldn't raise a family in that shadow. He tried to break away, but they wouldn't let him. They threatened him. They threatened my mother. The only way to protect her, I read, my voice cracking, was to push her away. I had to make her hate me. I staged fights. I pretended to drink. I became the monster she needed to run from. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, watching my own daughter look at me with fear and disgust. But it worked. She left. She took you, and later your sister, and she built a life far away from me, and far away from them. A safe life. That was all I ever wanted for her. Tears were streaming down Chloe's face now, silent and steady. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a space that had been filled with a dull resentment for a man I never knew, now carved out by sudden, shocking grief. He hadn't abandoned us. He had protected us. The letters continued, a chronicle of a lonely life lived in self-imposed exile. He had followed our lives from a distance, getting updates from a trusted friend in our hometown. He knew about our parents' car accident. He wrote about his helplessness, his rage at the universe, his desperate desire to come and get us. But I couldn't, he wrote. The men I worked for, their reach is long. Their memories are longer. If they ever knew I had grandchildren, they would see you as leverage, a way to get to me or to what I know. Putting you in the state's care, as anonymous orphans, was the cruelest and safest thing I could do. It broke my heart every single day. I chose your safety over my own comfort. I hope one day you can forgive me for that choice. The money in the box was the money he had earned from that life. He had never spent a dime of it on himself. He had lived like a pauper, saving it all. For us. There is $150,000 in this box, the final letter read. It is dirty money, and I'm ashamed of how I earned it. But I have cleaned it with my regret. Use it to pay the taxes. Use it to fix the house. Use it to build a life here, on this mountain that is the only clean thing I have ever known. The land is not just rock and pine. It is your sanctuary. It is your fortress. No one can touch you here. The development company, Mountain Valley Holdings, is a front for the same people I worked for. They don't want the land for a ski resort. They believe I hid something else here for them, something far more valuable than cash. Evidence. Records of their operations. They've been trying to get this land for years to dig it up and find it. Do not sell it to them. Whatever you do, do not let them have this mountain. He went on to explain where the evidence was hidden. Not on the property, but in a safe deposit box in a bank 2 towns over. The key was taped to the bottom of the footlocker. Take the evidence to the authorities, he wrote. It will be enough to dismantle their entire operation. It will make you enemies, but it will also make you free. Truly free. The choice is yours. You can take the money and disappear. I would not blame you. Or you can stay, and you can fight. You can claim the life they stole from our family. You can make this place your home. Whatever you choose, know that I loved you. I have loved you every moment of every day. Your loving grandfather, Thomas. I finished reading, and the silence in the cellar was thick with the weight of his words. The story of our lives had been a lie. We weren't the abandoned children of a failed family. We were the protected heirs of a man who had sacrificed everything for us. I looked at the bundles of cash, then at Chloe. Her tears had stopped. Her eyes, though red-rimmed, were clear and fierce. The choice he had laid before us wasn't really a choice at all. Not for us. We had spent our whole lives being pushed around by systems, by fate, by circumstance. We had been powerless. Now, for the first time, we had power. The power to fight back. The power to choose. We're staying, Chloe said, her voice ringing with a certainty that matched my own. This is our home. I nodded, a lump in my throat so thick I couldn't speak. I reached under the footlocker, and my fingers found the cold, smooth metal of a small key, held in place by a strip of brittle, yellowed tape. This was it. The key to our future. The key to our freedom. We spent that night in the barn. We couldn't bear the thought of the decaying house. We used the wool blankets from the footlocker and cleared a space on the hay-strewn floor of the loft. We had a small bag of trail mix and a bottle of water for dinner. It was cold, and the wind howled outside, rattling the big doors, but I had never felt safer. We talked for hours, rereading parts of our grandfather's letters, trying to piece together the life of this stranger who was the most important person in our world. We cried. We cried for the grandparents we never knew, for the parents we lost too soon, for the lonely, scared kids we had been. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of understanding. The next morning, we walked back down the mountain. The journey felt different this time. The woods didn't seem menacing. They seemed protective. The mountain felt like it was ours. When we walked into Mr. Davies' office, he looked up with an expression of pity, as if he expected us to hand him the signed contract. I placed the tax delinquency notice on his desk. Then, I opened my duffel bag and took out one of the bundles of cash. I unwrapped it and placed $10,000 in neat stacks on top of the notice. Mr. Davies stared at the money, his mouth slightly agape. Where did you get this?" he stammered. "Our grandfather left it for us," I said simply. "We'd like to pay the full amount of the back taxes today, and we need you to draw up a formal rejection of the offer from Mountain Valley Holdings." His professional demeanor cracked. He looked from the money to our faces, a dozen questions in his eyes. But he was a good lawyer, and a discreet one. He saw the set of our jaws, the look in our eyes, and he must have decided some questions were better left unasked. He just nodded slowly. "I'll have the cashier's check delivered to the county tax office by noon," he said, his voice regaining its professional tone. "And I'll draft the letter to Mountain Valley immediately. Congratulations, kids. The property is officially yours, free and clear." Walking out his office was the best feeling in the world. We weren't just orphans anymore. We were landowners. We were home. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. We used some of the money to buy an old, reliable pickup truck from a used car lot. We bought supplies, tools, lumber, cleaning products, warm clothes. We rented a small, cheap motel room in Red Creek that we used as a base of operations. Every day, we drove up to the property and we worked. We started with the house. It was a massive undertaking. We shoveled out years of debris. We tore out the rotten floorboards and replaced them. We patched the roof, a terrifying job that involved me clinging to the steep pitch while Chloe shouted instructions from the ground. We replaced every broken window. Slowly, painstakingly, the skeleton of the house began to feel like a home again. Jed from the diner became our first friend. He'd bring us hot meals some evenings, refusing to take any money. He'd sit on our newly repaired porch and tell us more stories about our grandfather, filling in the gaps. He told us how Thomas would buy groceries for families in town who were struggling, always leaving them on their porch anonymously. He was a quiet, hidden pillar of the community, a good man who had forced himself to wear the mask of a bad one. One afternoon, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows drove up the newly cleared road. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was from Mountain Valley Holdings. He didn't introduce himself. "We received your letter," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "Our offer of $5,000 was generous. We are now prepared to offer you $25,000. It's more than this dump is worth." I stood on the porch, a hammer in my hand. Chloe stood in the doorway behind me. We weren't scared. Not anymore. "The property is not for sale," I said, my voice even. He smiled, a thin, unpleasant expression. "Everything is for sale. We will be getting this land. It's only a matter of how." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The threat was clear, but our grandfather had given us the weapon to fight back. The next day, we drove the 2 hours to the town of Silver Creek, to the bank where the safe deposit box was. I used the key and my new ID. The bank manager led me into the vault. The box was long and thin. Inside was a single ledger book. I opened it. It was filled with our grandfather's neat handwriting. Dates, names, locations, shipment details. It was a complete record of the criminal enterprise, going back 20 years. It was dynamite. We knew we couldn't go to the local police. The organization was bound to have people on their payroll. We drove 4 hours to the state capitol, to the FBI field office. We walked in, two teenagers in dusty work clothes, and asked to speak to an agent. They almost turned us away, but something in our insistence, in the gravity of what we said, got us into a small, windowless interview room. An agent named Harris, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, listened to our story. She listened to everything, from the orphanage to the barn to the letters. I pushed the ledger across the table to her. She opened it and began to read. Her expression went from skepticism to intense focus. She read for almost an hour, turning the pages slowly. When she was done, she closed the book and looked at us. "You have any idea what you've done?" she said, her voice quiet with awe. "You've just handed us the key to dismantling one of the largest criminal networks in this state. Your grandfather was a very brave man. The investigation was swift and overwhelming. The ledger was the linchpin they needed. There were arrests. There were headlines. The name Mountain Valley Holdings was splashed across the news. Their assets were frozen. The threat that had shadowed our family for a generation was gone. We were finally completely free. We went back to our mountain. Winter was setting in, and the first snow had fallen, blanketing the world in a clean, quiet white. We had managed to get the old wood stove in the house working and a small generator for electricity. The house was no longer a ruin. It was small and rustic and imperfect, but it was warm and it was ours. We had a home. One evening, Chloe and I were sitting by the fire, reading books we'd bought in town. The snow was falling heavily outside, muffling the world in a deep, peaceful silence. "Do you ever miss it?" Chloe asked quietly. "The city? TV? Other people?" I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the noise of the group home, the feeling of being constantly watched but never truly seen. I thought about the anonymity, the feeling of being unmoored, a piece of driftwood in a vast ocean. "No," I said, and I meant it. "I don't. Everything I need is right here." I looked around the small, warm room. At the bookshelves we had built, filled with secondhand paperbacks. At the mismatched mugs on the counter. At my sister, safe and happy, her face illuminated by the firelight. This was more than a house. It was a legacy. It was the final gift from a grandfather who had loved us from afar, who had given us not just a piece of land, but a second chance. A chance to build a life on a foundation of truth and sacrifice. He had given us back our name. He had given us a home. Out here, on this mountain, under a blanket of snow, we weren't orphans anymore. We were millers, and we were finally where we belonged. The work had just begun, of course. There were fences to mend, fields to clear, a life to build from the ground up. But for the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an open field, waiting for us to plant something new. It felt like hope. I know there are people out there listening to this who feel like we did on that bus. Lost, alone, burdened by a past you didn't choose. You feel like you're at the end of the line. But what I want you to take from this, from our story, is that the end of one road is often just the beginning of a new path. Sometimes, the inheritance that looks like a burden is actually a gift. Sometimes, the thing you have to fight for is the only thing that can truly set you free. Our grandfather taught us that home isn't a place you're given. It's a place you claim. It's a choice you make every single day to stay, to build, to love, and to honor the sacrifices of those who came before you. So I want to ask you, what's the worthless land in your life that might hold a hidden treasure? What story have you been told about your past that might not be the whole truth? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Your stories matter. Our stories connect us. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. This is more than just a channel. It's a community for survivors, for fighters, for anyone who has ever had to find their own way home. You belong here.